TV Boy, part real, part fiction about the journey into television by author Harry Shrubshall. Part 1. Harry was one of a kind. Born into a world where telecommunication and entertainment would change the lives of billions forever. It all began with the hum of valves echoing from a thing called a baby nurse, which had a tiny black and white monitor screen. The static flickered, casting faint tiny shadows on the hospital room wall. No one could have predicted that the first cry of the newborn boy would blend seamlessly into the hum of a tiny electric monitor. The doctors were baffled. The nurses speechless.
For as long as anyone could remember, there had never been a child like him born not into the world of flesh and blood, but into a glowing screen that would later develop into visual entertainment inside the lounge rooms of nearly every home in Australia.
He was to be one of us, then and become a certified TV boy. He was to be one of us, then and become a certified TV boy.
TV Boy Part 2. Harry's world was filled with a low hum of static, the soft crackle of invisible electricity coursing through his home like a second language he'd learned before words. He sat in his high chair, his tiny hands gripping the wooden tray as he stared at the glowing screen in front of him. His mother called it a television, but to Harry, it was more than that. It was a portal, a flickering window that made the living room come alive in ways he couldn't yet understand. Today, the portal wasn't showing people or places, it was something else. It was showing a strange black and white pattern, a bullseye-like shape with concentric circles, grids, and lines. The TV test pattern hypnotized Harry. The shapes seemed to float, suspended in the buzzing air between him and the screen. He blinked slowly, his large eyes reflecting the static, wide with wonder. The world beyond the screen didn't hold much interest to him. Sure, his mother's voice was there, along with the clatter of dishes and the sound of wind outside the window. But this signal was magical. His pudgy fingers reached out toward the TV, as if he could touch the shapes that moved in perfect, mechanical rhythm. The test pattern was a sort of lullaby, a quiet hum of order in a world that felt too big, too loud. Harry didn't know what it was for. He didn't know that the test pattern was a tool to help. Technicians aligned the picture, but to him, it was a sign that his glowing companion was always there, pulsing with life, even when it wasn't showing stories or faces. In his small mind, Harry began to imagine the shapes as something more, a secret language just for him, a code he would one day learn to understand. Even as a baby, he knew that the television wasn't just a piece of furniture, it was his. His world, his reality, his window into everything. TV Boy Part 3. Harry had always been surrounded by a haze of cigarette smoke, the drone of relatives chatting, and the clink of dishes in the background. His world, a constant blur of noise and activity, felt too small, too mundane for his imagination. So he began retreating into the flickering screen in the corner of the living room, where a different kind of life played out in front of him. The Texas Rangers galloped across the open plains, their hats tipped low as they chased bandits under the wide, endless sky. Flash Gordon soared through space, battling alien invaders with lasers and courage. Harry found himself slipping more and more into these stories, the familiar faces of his family fading into the background, their words becoming unintelligible murmurs as he lost himself in the vibrant adventures on the screen. The more he watched, the less real his own world felt. He began to blur the lines between himself and the heroes he admired. Was he still Harry, sitting on the worn-out couch with his feet barely touching the floor? Or was he a gunslinger, fighting for justice in the Wild West? Or maybe he was a space explorer, saving the universe from perilous threats. The TV crackled and hummed, pulling him deeper into its grasp, and the room around him seemed to fade away. The thick cigarette smoke curled like tendrils around his thoughts, and the chatter of his relatives became distant, hollow sounds. Harry wasn't just watching anymore, he was living in these stories, slowly losing himself to a world where everything was larger, brighter, and more exciting than his own.
TV Boy Part 4. Harry's fascination with the heroes he saw on TV began to seep into his everyday life, sparking his vivid imagination. Inspired by the likes of Flash Gordon, Harry decided to transform an old prom into his very own makeshift spaceship. He scavenged whatever materials he could find around the house: cardboard boxes, aluminum foil, and old sheets to fashion rocket boosters and a control panel on the prom's handle. In his backyard, Harry would push his spaceship around, imagining himself soaring through galaxies, battling alien invaders, and embarking on daring rescue missions just like his idol. The quiet suburban yard became his own universe, and Harry its fearless space captain. But Harry's dreams of adventure weren't limited to outer space. When he wasn't navigating distant planets, he was playing the part of a rough-and-tumble cowboy from the Wild West. With a toy gun holstered to his side and a paper hat on his head, he would gallop around his yard, pretending to shoot outlaws and Indians like the ones he saw in old Western films. In his mind, he was the sheriff of a dusty frontier town, protecting the innocent and bringing justice to the wild plains. Every corner of his world became part of a thrilling narrative, shaped by the heroes he admired on screen.
TV Boy Part 5. Harry's imagination had always been a vivid sanctuary, but as he spent more time glued to the TV, the line between reality and fantasy began to blur. The vibrant worlds on screen, especially the thrilling, lawless westerns, offered an escape from his dull, lonely childhood at home. The flickering images of cowboys, gunfights, and vast open plains became his world. He would often sit for hours, losing himself in the adventures of Wyatt Earp, the fearless lawman played by Hugh O'Brian. In his daydreams, Harry wasn't just watching the show. He was part of it, riding alongside Earp, saving towns from outlaws, and living a life of adventure far from the quiet, uneventful reality of his own life. As his 7th birthday approached, Harry's yearning to truly enter the TV world grew, and when the chance came to appear on the Happy Hammond Tarak show and meet his hero, he couldn't contain his excitement. On the day of his birthday, Harry dressed in his best cowboy suit, complete with a shiny badge and a toy gun strapped to his waist, ready to meet Wyatt Earp in the flesh. He was supposed to appear on the show, live on air, celebrating with the other children, but fate had other plans. Traffic and a series of small delays meant Harry arrived at the studio just after the live segment had ended. His heart sank when he realized he had missed his moment of glory, his chance to share the screen with his TV hero. However, his disappointment quickly turned to awe when he was led backstage and introduced to Hugh O'Brian himself. Despite the missed celebration, meeting the man behind Wyatt Earp was more than Harry could have ever dreamed. The encounter left a lasting impression on him, fueling his desire to escape further into the world of television, where adventure and excitement never ended.